Hi, Michelle. We're just happy to be chatting with you today in connection with Joy Baker Day, what it's all about, and what we can learn from it. As hopefully many people are starting to become aware, Joy Baker was just an ordinary mother. Here she is there with her children. Joy had 7 children, and she was, as I say, an ordinary mum back in the 50s and 60s who chose not to send her children to school and had many, many run ins with the local authority. And this book of hers, which is called Children in Chancery, this is quite an old copy. They're quite hard to come by because they're no longer in print. And but it details her story of her battles with the local authority over a period of 10 years. And she won her battle decisively on the 15th of November 1961, and then wrote this book in 1964. That's when it was printed. Um, and she was quite a remarkable woman. She was not, as we were often keen to say, she was not um, perfect, as most of us are not. She was definitely a very ordinary mum, but she had a phenomenal spirit, and knew with a passion that she wanted to educate her children at herself at home. And it was a long battle to get that recognized. So, Michelle, you know some of Joy's story. What are some of the challenges that we're still facing today that Joy faced?
So Joy effectively had a whole decade of being oppressed by her local authority, by excessive state interference, by just being a mother trying to act in the best interest of her child, trying to provide them with the education as a family in the way that she thought was the most appropriate for them. And the local authority just didn't want to accept that she was allowed to do that. Now, ultimately, as we've just said, in 1961, the courts made clear that she did have the right to do that, but that didn't come easy. That was pretty much a decade of fighting,
Yes.
um, and quite a horrific experience. If you do get a chance to get sight of the book, it is a good read. Um, but that links on to today, and we really need to think about the battle she went and not forget that although we have the right to home educate at the moment, there are some local authorities currently that are excessively interfering in family life, that are not accepting your right to home educate, that are asking for excessive things, that are not accepting when you say, that's my house, I don't want you coming in. Now, they've no legal right to enter the house, but there are certain local authorities at the moment that are not listening when someone goes, "No, thank you. I don't need you to come into my house." And the parent might say, "I'm quite happy to show you this or tell you what I'm doing in another way. I am home educating. I am meeting the requirements. I just don't want you in my house." And some local authorities still at the moment are saying, "But that's all we accept." And it's really, really important that we all hold the line and still keep holding the line, because when people give up, everyone loses out. And in certain local authorities, it is a lot harder to say, no, I am doing my best. I am home educating my child appropriately. Um, I don't need to do it the way you want me to, because actually I'm working out what's suitable for my child's age, ability, aptitude, and factoring their SEN. I'm making sure it's full time. I'm making sure it's bespoke to what they need and what they need to learn now. And I'm acting in their best interests. Um, and it's going to get worse. If you listen to the government each time they mention the Children's Wellbeing Bill, it, the latest talk of it is they're going to add support for home educators. Well, if you look at the last DfE census statistics, what they class as support is visiting you. What they class as support is giving you advice how to do it.
Another one
It's
of their
not.
support things was to help them keep accurate records.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Yes, and the support is giving, them, showing them your child's work, um, which none of that sounds very supportive to me. So if support looks like we'd give you a dedicated phone number or an email to contact us should you need us to assist, Or the classic one that I know many parents have asked about, access to exam centres. Now, funding for exams, if your child wants to take them up, would be brilliant. But I think, that sounds a bit pie in the sky to me. But if we could just have access to exam centres, so you'd have the options. But all of this is really important to remember when you look at, if they start support in their view of what support is, we will be battling again. And we need to remember the battle Joy Baker went through to secure us to be at this level of being allowed to home educate our children in the manner we believe is correct for them. We don't want that to slide back at all. And if we allow the local authorities to get the powers in legislation to be able to dictate to us how our home education needs to look, or to be able to access our homes, we will end up back where Joy Baker was. We'll have battle after battle, or our children will all end up in an institution that we may not choose for them. So it's really important that people reflect back on what people have done before and stood the line. And it wasn't quick and easy for Joy Baker. That was, 10 years of fighting. And it was stressful. And I know it's easy to just go, yeah, well, if I just have a visit, it doesn't affect anyone else. If I just give my child's workbook, it doesn't affect anyone else. The problem is it does, because gradually they then expect that. So then the people who just want to get on with it, quite happy, I know what I'm doing, acting in my child's best interest, they then start to get looked at on suspicion. And
That
they're not doing
becomes
anything
ammunition. It
suspicious.
becomes ammunition in the hands of the local authority, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It's
no,
weaponized.
absolutely. Absolutely. No, I've had a few cases this week where literally the local authorities quoted the very, very low number that do not allow us in their houses. Now, I don't know whether I agree or disagree with the numbers they've quoted in the letters, but in the letters sent to a parent who does not want to comply in a certain way, it literally stated this amount of the home educators in the areas do let us come in their house.
That is
It
not,
is less
that
than
doesn't
this
make it
amount.
law. It does
Yeah,
not make it law.
but it adds to the pressure, and it makes it much
Exactly.
harder for the parent who they just want to get on with their job of rearing their child,
Yeah.
and making their child happy and letting them thrive.
Well, for many children, their home is their safe space, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, my son would never let anyone in our house, and heaven help if anyone decided to try and doorstep us. Um, but it is, and particularly if children have additional needs as well, you
Yeah.
can actually, that knock on the door could potentially put that family's whole education journey back weeks, months even,
Yeah. And where children have been
because
traumatized as well through a school experience, they're very, very concerned about authorities coming to the house, aren't they?
absolutely. And also, everyone should be entitled to have somewhere that's just their home.
Exactly. And the British law actually supports that notion. It's just there's an attitude that's developed over the years with some people feeling like, but why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't we be allowed to come in your house? And I can tell you one very good example why you don't, where the local authority was live streaming the house.
Wasn't that the education committee? I've got a
It
feeling that was Bradford LA with the
it
education
was, but
committee. I
it
think
was
the MP
shared. I think
raised
it was shared in one of the other. I don't remember all the details, but this local authority bod was basically walking around the house with their phone, live streaming that back to
live
the
streaming.
office. It's a huge invasion of privacy, and people they just actually don't realize that that's actually not okay. There's a mindset where this is actually okay, and it was like that for Joy Baker as well, where it was like, why would you not want to send your children to school? It's the place for children to be. And you get those mindsets that you come up against. And just talking a little bit about the children well-being bill, that's something that we are anticipating we may see being presented in Parliament in the not too distant future, because Labour have committed to it. Um, And this is something that people really need to be aware of, and start talking to MPs now, really, shouldn't they? They need to start building awareness.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some MPs they quite like hearing the stories, because the difficulty is, if no one engages with them, all they know is what the party political line is. So if they've never actually met a real life home educator, all they know is what might have been in the media. Um, and it's very rarely the positive stories that make it to the front page. And they're not reading the tiny little paragraphs at the bottom. They're looking at the headlines. And unfortunately, when you look at there's a handful of negative stories, and again, a lot of those negative stories are um, not necessarily as accurate as people think when you go through the actual detail of the stories, compared to the thousands and thousands of successful adults who were happily home educated, who are now running business, running their own businesses, working alongside lots of other people, working in museums, in hospitals. I'm aware of a barrister who's home educated. I'm aware of vets who are home educated. I'm aware of a few solicitors that were home educated. I'm aware of doctors that were home educated. I'm aware of quite a few that have gone into film and the arts that were home educated, but they are successfully living among us. But those success stories don't make the headline on the newspaper. And so, unfortunately, unless we engage with MPs and tell them, you'll stop these people thriving in the future if you don't let me act in the best interests of my children and my family. Quite often, we also hear the children's rights argument that comes through with the Children's Wellbeing Bill, and so, but it's the children's right to education. And we need to make sure that when we're talking to MPs, we're not forgetting that bit, because they need to understand, well, actually, I'm respecting my child's right to education by providing them a secure family nurturing environment to be stable and able to be raised in a way to become a fully functioning adult with good mental well-being. Um, and the only way we will defend and keep our lines is if we are engaging with our local councillors, our MPs, those who have the power to actually change what gets put in that wellbeing bill, or potentially get it stopped. But
Yeah,
it does sound like it's a big bill that's going to incorporate a lot. So I think that
yeah,
might be getting a bit excessive. But if we can
yeah.
get parts of it tailored or removed before it becomes fully published,
That would be great.
that
Yeah.
will work well. It'd be fantastic.
And I think it's really important, if you've got children that are confident and happy, to meet your MPs as well. I think it is really, really important that the MPs get to see them where possible, because I think that has been a definitive factor in changing the minds of MPs in the past, is actually being able to see the children for themselves, to see that they are well and they are happy and that they're thriving.